Mom and Dad, I've already paid for this house twice over, and now I own everything else too." The silence that followed was deafening. My brother Alex's pen froze mid-signature, hovering above the transfer deed my parents had convinced him to sign. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." My father's face drained of color so fast I thought he might faint. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. None of them expected me to walk through that door today. None of them expected me to have copies of every financial record for the past 15 years. And certainly, none of them expected that I'd already spoken with the family lawyer that morning. They thought I was just the dutiful daughter. The reliable Emma who would keep quiet, keep paying, and keep pretending not to notice when they took advantage. But what happens when the family ATM suddenly shows receipts? What happens when the invisible daughter becomes the majority shareholder? I still remember the day I bought my first house in Oakridge. It wasn't much, a modest 3-bedroom with chipped paint and outdated appliances on Maple Street. But it was mine. Or at least, it was supposed to be. I was 26, fresh off, a promotion at the digital marketing firm where I'd been working since college. The housing market had dipped just enough to make it possible for me to scrape together a down payment after years of saving. My parents, Diane and Robert, had initially scoffed at the idea. Why waste money on a starter home? My mother had, asked over Sunday dinner. You should save for something better. My brother Alex nodded along, mouth full of pot roast. He was still living in their basement at 32, supposedly building his business. Though what that business was seemed to change monthly. I signed the papers anyway, a quiet act of rebellion. The ink had barely dried when my phone rang. It was Dad, voice strained in that way that always preceded a financial request. "Emma, honey, we're in a bit of a situation with the bank." By situation, he meant they were 3 months behind on their mortgage and facing possible foreclosure. By the end of the call, I had agreed to loan them enough to cover the payments, plus a little extra for breathing room. That was the first time I paid for a house that wasn't really mine. The morning I discovered the betrayal started normally enough. Crisp October air seeped through my bedroom window, and golden leaves scattered across the lawn outside. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through emails when a message from Uncle James popped up. Uncle James wasn't actually a blood relative. He was Dad's college roommate who'd spent so many holidays with us that the title stuck. He'd also become the family's lawyer, handling everything from wills to real estate transactions. Emma wanted to check if you're still coming to the signing today. Your parents seem eager to get this property transfer to Alex finalized. 3 p.m. at my office. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. Property transfer? What property? I hadn't heard anything about this. I typed back casually. Just confirming which property this is for? His response came quickly. The Maple Street house, of course. Your parents said you agreed to sign it over to Alex since he's been living there and managing it. They've got the gift tax covered. Standard transfer of deed. Nothing complicated. My hands began to shake so badly that coffee sloshed onto my keyboard. The Maple Street house was my house. The one I'd purchased. The one I still paid the mortgage on, though my parents had been collecting rent from Alex for the past 5 years. Rent that never seemed to make its way to me. They'd convinced me to let Alex move in temporarily when his girlfriend kicked him out, claiming he needed a stable place while he got back on his feet. Somehow, temporary had stretched into half a decade. I dabbed at my keyboard with a tissue, mind racing. They were planning to transfer my house to my brother without even telling me? And worse, they had apparently been representing themselves as the owners all along. I called Uncle James immediately. James, there must be some mistake. I own the Maple Street house. I bought it 7 years ago. I have the mortgage in my name. The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably. Emma, your parents provided documentation showing they purchased the house and have been maintaining it as a rental property. They said you were aware of the arrangement. What documentation? My voice sounded strange, tight and thin. Deed records, payment histories. Everything seemed in order. They said you helped with the down payment as a gift, but the property has always been in their names. I closed my eyes, suddenly understanding. Years ago, when I'd needed their co-signature on the mortgage due to my limited credit history, they must have found a way to put the deed in their names. And I, trusting and naive, had never verified the final paperwork. James, I need you to do something for me, I said quietly. Don't proceed with any signing until I get there. I have documentation of my own. After hanging up, I sat motionless at my kitchen table. The betrayal wasn't just about the house. It was about years of financial manipulation disguised as family obligation. My mind flashed to the investments I'd made in Alex's string of failed business ventures, the loans to my parents that were never repaid, the joint account I'd opened with my mother in case of emergencies that mysteriously drained each month. I had been a human ATM for my family, dispensing cash without question, because that's what good daughters do. Because family comes first. Because I was the responsible one with the real job, while Alex was still finding his path. A cold clarity washed over me. I picked up my phone and called in sick to work. Then I drove to my bank and requested complete transaction histories for all my accounts. Next, I visited the county records office and pulled the property records for the Maple Street house. Sure enough, my parents' names were on the deed, not mine, despite the mortgage being in my name, despite every payment coming from my account. As I drove home with a folder full of documents, I began to calculate just how much my family had taken from me over the years. The house down payment and 7 years of mortgage payments, the loans that were never repaid, the business investments, in Alex's schemes, the mysterious withdrawals from the joint account. It was well over $300,000, nearly everything I had earned in my adult life. But I wasn't just angry about the money. I was heartbroken by the deception. Every Sunday dinner, every birthday celebration, every casual phone call asking how I was doing. Had it all been a setup for the next request? Was I nothing more than a convenient source of funds? I spent the next few hours compiling everything. Bank statements, canceled checks, emails requesting money, text messages promising repayment. I created a spreadsheet documenting every dollar I had given them, with dates, purposes, and promises. I printed credit reports showing the accounts opened in my name without my knowledge. I found the original purchase agreement for the house with my signature, proving my intent to be the owner. By 2:30 p.m., I had a complete financial history of my family's betrayal. I dressed carefully, not in my usual jeans and sweater, but in the charcoal pencil skirt and blazer I reserved for client presentations. I applied makeup with precision, pulled my brown hair into a sleek bun, and put on the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me, the one family member who had always seen me clearly. The drive to Uncle James's office took 15 minutes. With each mile, my nervousness gave way to a strange calm. For years, I had hidden my resentment behind a mask of familial duty. I had swallowed my protests, convinced myself that helping my family was the right thing to do. Today, that mask would come off. I parked across the street from the small brick building that housed James's law practice. Through the window, I could see them already inside, Mom, Dad, and Alex, looking relaxed and smiling as James laid papers on the conference table. They were early, eager to complete the theft before I could discover it. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my documentation and walked into the building. I didn't rush, didn't storm in with dramatic accusations. I simply opened the door to the conference room and stepped inside. "Emma," my mother's surprise seemed genuine. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited," I said evenly, placing my folder on the table. Uncle James mentioned there was a property transfer happening today. My father's face immediately tensed, but he recovered quickly. Oh, we were going to surprise you once it was done. Alex is finally ready to take on the responsibility of home ownership. And since he's been living in the rental property anyway. You mean my house on Maple Street? I interrupted, my voice steady. The one I purchased 7 years ago? The one I still pay the mortgage on every month? Alex rolled his eyes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Come on, Emma. You know Mom and Dad bought that as an investment property. You've just been helping with some of the payments. I turned to Uncle James. I have the original purchase documents with my signature. I have proof of every mortgage payment coming from my personal account for the past 7 years. I have documentation showing I've paid over $170,000 toward a house that apparently isn't in my name. James looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and my parents. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, I said firmly. My parents put the deed in their names when they co-signed my mortgage, never transferred it to me as promised, and have been representing themselves as the owners ever since. They've been collecting rent from Alex, rent that I never received, while I continued to pay the mortgage, insurance, and property taxes. My mother's face had gone pale. My father leaned forward, voice dropping to the soothing tone he always used when trying to manage a situation. Emma, honey, we were just trying to help you build equity. Alex needs stability right now, and you're doing so well with your career. I opened my folder and began laying documents on the table, one by one. These are bank statements showing every mortgage payment coming from my account. These are the property tax payments, also from my account. These are records of the loans you've taken from me over the years, over $130,000 that was never repaid. I placed a final document in front of James. And this is a record of the joint account I opened with Mom for emergencies, showing withdrawals totaling $42,000 for expenses that had nothing to do with emergencies and everything to do with funding Alex's lifestyle. The room had gone completely silent. James looked stunned as he examined the documents. Alex had slumped back in his chair, his earlier confidence evaporating. My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. My father was the first to recover. Emma, this is family business. We don't need to involve James in our private financial arrangements. This stopped being a private arrangement when you scheduled a legal transfer of property that doesn't belong to you, I replied. And it's not just about the house, Dad. It's about years of taking advantage of me financially while treating me like an outsider emotionally. It's about favoring Alex at every turn while expecting me to foot the bill for all of it. That's not fair, my mother protested weakly. We've always loved you both equally. Equal love doesn't look like this, I said, gesturing to the pile of financial records. Equal love doesn't mean draining one child's accounts to support the other's whims. Equal love doesn't mean putting a house in your names that I paid for. Alex finally spoke up, his voice defensive. It's not my fault if Mom and Dad wanted to help me out. I turned to him, feeling surprisingly calm. No, it's not your fault that they favored you, but it is your fault that you accepted everything, without question, that you lived in my house without paying fair rent, that you took and took without ever considering where the money was coming from. Mom and Dad said, Mom and Dad aren't the ones who've been paying for everything, Alex. I am. I took a deep breath and turned back to James. I want the deed to the Maple Street house transferred to my name immediately, where it always should have been. I want all joint accounts with my parents closed, and I want a legal acknowledgement of the debts owed to me. James nodded slowly, looking troubled. Based on what you've shown me, Emma, you have a strong case. I can't represent any of you in this matter since it's a conflict of interest, but I would strongly advise, he looked pointedly at my parents, that you consider Emma's request carefully before this escalates further. My mother began to cry, quiet tears that had always worked to make me back down in the past. My father placed his arm around her shoulders, glaring at me as if I was the one causing pain. Mom and Dad, I've already paid for this house twice over. And now I own everything else too. The silence that followed was deafening. My brother Alex's pen froze mid-signature, hovering above the transfer deed my parents had convinced him to sign. My father's face drained of color so fast I thought he might faint. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. None of them expected me to walk through that door today. None of them expected me to have copies of every financial record for the past 15 years. And certainly, none of them expected that I'd already spoken with the family lawyer that morning. "What do you mean you own everything else?" Alex finally asked, breaking the silence. I reached into my bag and pulled out one more document, the one I'd been saving. 2 years ago, when Grandpa Thomas died, he left his estate to be divided among his grandchildren. You were going through another rough patch, Alex, so Mom and Dad convinced me that you needed your inheritance immediately for your business venture. They said if I allowed them to give you my portion as well, they would make it up to me by putting their house in my name instead. My father's face had turned from pale to ashen. Emma, that was a private family matter. But they never did transfer the house, I continued, ignoring him. Instead, they took out a second mortgage on it to fund Alex's food truck idea, which failed within 6 months. What they didn't know was that Grandpa had a separate trust, one that would only activate if the primary inheritance was mismanaged. I slid the document across to James. This morning, I met with Grandpa's estate lawyer. The conditions of the trust have been met. As of today, I am the legal owner of the family home on Cedar Avenue, the vacation cabin in Pine Lake, and controlling shareholder in Dad's automotive supply business. That's impossible, my father sputtered, reaching for the document. My father would never do that. Grandpa Thomas was sharper than you gave him credit for, I said quietly. He watched how you favored Alex, how you treated me like a piggy bank instead of a daughter. He built in protections I didn't even know about until his lawyer contacted me after seeing the second mortgage filing. My mother had stopped crying, shock replacing her tears. You can't take our home, Emma. You wouldn't do that to us. I don't want to take anything from you, I replied, feeling suddenly exhausted. I never did. All I wanted was to be valued as your daughter, not your personal bank. All I wanted was fairness. Alex pushed back from the table, face flushed, with anger. So what? You're going to make us all homeless now? Destroy Dad's business? This is why Mom and Dad had to protect me. You've always been jealous of their attention. I'm not going to make anyone homeless, I said evenly. But things are going to change. The Maple Street house will be transferred to my name today, and Alex will start paying market rate rent if he wants to continue living there. To me, not to Mom and Dad. The family home will remain yours to live in. I looked at my parents. But there will be no more mortgages, no more using it as an ATM for Alex's schemes. I turned to my brother. As for Dad's business, I have no intention of interfering as long as it's run properly. But the days of siphoning company funds for personal expenses are over. You can't prove any of that, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. The business audit I requested this morning suggests otherwise, I replied. Grandpa's lawyer had been monitoring things for years, compiling evidence. He just needed someone to finally take action. The fight seemed to go out of my father. All at once. He suddenly looked old, defeated. My mother reached for his hand, her expression lost. James cleared his throat. I think we should adjourn for today. Given these developments, I recommend you all seek individual legal counsel before proceeding further. As we gathered our things, a strange calm settled over me. I wasn't happy. How could I be, discovering the depth of my family's betrayal? But I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: self-respect. My mother caught up to me in the parking lot. "Emma, wait," she called, her voice strained. "You can't just walk away. We're still your family." I turned to face her, suddenly aware of how small she looked, how vulnerable without the power dynamic she'd always relied on. "Yes, you are," I said softly. "And that's why this hurts so much. Families shouldn't treat each other the way you've treated me." "We were just trying to help Alex," she insisted. "He's always needed more support." "And what about what I needed, Mom? Did you ever think about that? Did you ever consider that your support of Alex came at my expense? That while you were praising him for the smallest accomplishments, you were taking my genuine successes for granted?" She looked down at the pavement. "You were always so capable, Emma. So independent. We didn't think you needed us the way Alex did." "I didn't need you to solve my problems," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. "I needed you to love me equally, to protect me the way you protected him, to see me." For a moment, I thought I saw recognition in her eyes, a flash of understanding. But it was quickly replaced by the defensive look I knew so well. "If you go through with this, if you enforce all these changes, you'll destroy this family," she said. I shook my head slowly. "No, Mom. The family was already broken. I'm just finally acknowledging it." I turned and walked to my car, her eyes burning into my back with each step. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, not the house on Maple Street where Alex lived, but the small one-bedroom I'd rented after letting him move into my house. The weight of the day pressed down on me like a physical thing. My phone had been buzzing nonstop. Texts from Alex ranging from apologetic to threatening, voicemails from my father alternating between anger and attempts at negotiation, messages from my mother that were nothing but sobbing. I silenced it all and opened my laptop. One by one, I began transferring funds from the joint accounts into my personal account. I changed passwords, removed authorized users, and documented everything. It wasn't about the money, though I certainly needed it after years of depletion. It was about boundaries, about finally saying no. As I worked, a memory surfaced. I was 10 years old, proudly showing my father the straight-A report card I'd worked so hard for. He'd glanced at it, nodded briefly, and then turned his full attention to Alex's C+ in math, praising him effusively for the improvement from his previous D. I remembered the hollow feeling in my stomach, the early lesson that my achievements would never merit the celebration that Alex's mediocrity received. I had carried that feeling with me into adulthood, always striving, always giving, always hoping that eventually my contributions would be seen, valued. Instead, they had become expected, then demanded, then taken without acknowledgement. A text from an unknown number broke through my reverie. "Emma, it's Uncle James. I've recused myself from representing your family, but as someone who cares about all of you, I want to say, what you did today took courage. Your grandfather would be proud." The validation from someone who had known our family dynamics for decades brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed someone, anyone, to confirm that I wasn't crazy, that the imbalance I'd felt for years was real. 3 days passed with no direct contact from my family, though I heard through mutual friends that my parents were devastated by Emma's actions, and that Alex was considering legal options, though what those might be, given the documentation I had, was unclear. On the 4th day, as I was leaving work, I found my father waiting beside my car in the company parking lot. He looked haggard, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Can we talk?" he asked simply. I hesitated, then nodded toward a nearby coffee shop. Neutral territory. We sat across from each other at a small table by the window, steam rising from untouched cups. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. "The business audit came back," he finally said, staring into his coffee. It's worse than I thought. The accountant says we've been operating in the red for years, using capital investments to cover operating costs. I waited, suspecting there was more. Your grandfather knew, he continued. He called me out on it 3 years ago, told me I was running his legacy into the ground. That's when he must have set up the contingency trust. He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. He never told me about it. Just said if I didn't straighten things out, there would be consequences. And instead of fixing the problems, you took out more loans and mortgages, I said quietly. Used my inheritance to cover the gaps. He nodded, shoulders slumping. Alex had ideas. They always sounded so promising. Alex always has ideas, Dad. What he doesn't have is follow-through, or business sense, or any concept of financial responsibility. The words came out harsher than I intended, years of frustration behind them. He's my son, my father said weakly. And I'm your daughter, I replied. But that never seemed to count for as much. He flinched as if I'd struck him. We didn't mean to hurt you, Emma. You just didn't think about me at all, I finished for him. About how your actions affected me. About how it felt to watch every loan go unrepaid, every sacrifice go unacknowledged, every success go uncelebrated, because you were too busy managing Alex's latest crisis. For the first time in my memory, my father looked at me, really looked at me, with something like recognition in his eyes. You're right, he said softly. We took you for granted. Assumed you'd be fine no matter what, because you always were. Used your stability to subsidize Alex's chaos. He reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. I'm sorry, Emma, it's not enough, I know, but I am sorry. I didn't reach back, not yet. What do you want from me, Dad? He drew a deep breath. Help. The business is failing. The house has 2 mortgages. Alex is talking about suing all of us, including you. It's all falling apart. And you think I should fix it? Again? No, he said, surprising me. I think I need to fix it, but I don't know how, not alone. He looked down at his hands, then back at me. You're good at this, at organizing, planning, seeing the big picture. I'm asking for your guidance, not your money. Not this time. I studied his face, looking for the manipulation I'd grown so accustomed to detecting. Instead, I saw something new, humility, genuine need, the recognition of his own failures. I'll help you develop a restructuring plan for the business, I said finally, and I'll help negotiate with the mortgage company on the house. But there are conditions. Anything, he said quickly. First, Alex needs to get professional financial counseling. Real counseling, not just a pep talk from you or Mom. He nodded reluctantly. Second, I want family therapy. All of us. Together. With someone who specializes in family dynamics and financial abuse. His eyebrows rose at the term abuse, but he didn't argue. Third, I want the Maple Street house transferred to my name immediately, as it always should. Have been. And I want a formal acknowledgement of all the money taken from me over the years, with a repayment plan, even if it takes decades. He swallowed hard. Your mother won't like the therapy idea, or admitting we took advantage. Those are my terms, I said firmly. Take them or leave them. After a long moment, he nodded. I'll talk to her, and to Alex. He hesitated. He's not a bad kid, Emma, just lost. I know he's not bad, I said more gently. But he's also not a kid anymore. He's 32. It's time for him to stand on his own feet, without using mine as a stepladder. A ghost of a smile crossed my father's face. You sound like your grandfather. He used to say something similar about me. We parted with no hugs, no promises of immediate reconciliation, just a tentative agreement to meet again in a week, with my mother and Alex present, to begin the long process of rebuilding what had been broken, not just by the recent revelations, but by years of imbalance and unspoken resentments. As I drove home that evening, rain beginning to spatter against my windshield, I felt a curious lightness despite the difficult conversation. For the first time in my adult life, I had spoken my truth without diluting it to protect others' feelings. I had stated my needs without apologizing for having them. I had stood my ground. The road ahead would be difficult. Family therapy would unearth more painful dynamics. The business restructuring would reveal more financial mismanagement. Alex might never fully accept his role in the situation or the new boundaries I was establishing. My mother might continue to see me as the villain in her narrative of family, harmony. But something fundamental had shifted. I had stopped being the family ATM, the invisible supporter, the reliable cushion for everyone else's falls. I had started being Emma, daughter, sister, granddaughter, but also individual, person with rights, woman with boundaries. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat for a moment in the darkened car, rain drumming steadily on the roof. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Made appointment with financial counselor for Alex on Thursday. He agreed to go. It was a small step, the first of many needed, but it was something. As I gathered my things to head inside, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Behind the exhaustion, behind the lingering hurt, I saw something else. In my eyes, strength. The kind that comes not from never being broken, but from finally standing up after being bent too far for too long. I had spent years believing that family meant sacrifice without limits, giving without condition, loving without reciprocation. Now I understood that real family, healthy family, had to include mutual respect, balanced support, and acknowledged worth. We weren't there yet, might never fully arrive. But at least now we were walking in the right direction, with our eyes open to the path. I grabbed my umbrella and stepped out into the rain, ready to face whatever came next. I spent the next week in a fog, moving through my daily routines like a ghost in my own life. The office felt impossibly far away even though I was physically present, nodding at meetings and responding to emails with mechanical precision. My coworkers noticed something was off, but I deflected their concerns with vague mentions of family stuff, which wasn't exactly a lie. At night, I'd come home to my small apartment, the one I'd been renting since letting Alex move into what I thought was my house, and stare at the walls until sleep mercifully took me. My phone continued to buzz with messages from my family. Mom's texts cycled between guilt trips. How could you do this to us? Manipulative nostalgia. Remember when we were all so happy? And outright denial. You're exaggerating everything. Dad's approach was more tactical, alternating between appealing to my sense of duty, family has to stick together, and making vague promises about making things right. Alex's messages were the most erratic, accusatory one moment, apologetic the next, then shifting to entitled demands about what he deserved from our grandfather's estate. I stopped responding after the first day. Each message only confirmed what I already knew. They still didn't get it. They saw my actions as a betrayal rather than a response to years of their own betrayal. They painted me as the villain in a story where I had always been the victim. Most importantly, they still viewed me primarily as a resource to be managed rather than a person to be respected. 7 days after the confrontation at Uncle James's office, I found myself back at the bank, this time to open entirely new accounts at a different institution. The banker, Emily, according to her nameplate, smiled politely as I explained my situation in the vaguest terms possible. I need to separate my finances completely from my family members, I said, sliding my ID across the desk. New accounts, new cards, new online banking credentials. Everything. Emily nodded, her expression professionally neutral. We can certainly help with that. Will you be transferring existing accounts or starting fresh? Transferring. I replied. But I need to make sure there's absolutely no way for anyone else to access these new accounts. No joint access, no authorized users, nothing. Something in my tone must have communicated the urgency because Emily's professional mask slipped just slightly, her eyes softening. I understand completely. We can set up enhanced security measures as well. Two-factor authentication, security, questions, the works. As we worked through the paperwork, I found myself wondering how many other people sat in this same chair, desperately trying to disentangle their finances from those who had abused their trust. How many other daughters, sons, spouses had reached this breaking point where protecting themselves financially became an act of emotional survival? Ms. Lawson? Emily's voice broke through my thoughts. I need your signature here and here. She pointed to the final forms with a manicured fingernail. I signed my name, Emma Lawson, in careful strokes. Each signature felt like a declaration of independence. Your new accounts will be active immediately, Emily said, gathering the paperwork. Your debit card should arrive within 5 to 7 business days, but here's a temporary card you can use in the meantime. Is there anything else I can help you with today? I hesitated, then asked the question that had been gnawing at me. How common is this? People coming in to separate their finances from family members. Emily's professional veneer cracked, just slightly. More common than you'd think, and more common than it should be. She lowered her voice slightly. Financial entanglement is one of the hardest ties to break. You're doing the right thing by being thorough. I nodded, strangely comforted by her validation. As I stood to leave, she added, Ms. Lawson, the hardest part is what you've already done, recognizing the problem and taking action. Everything else is just paperwork. I carried those words with me as I left the bank, new account information securely tucked in my purse. Everything else is just paperwork. If only that were true. The financial separation was the straightforward part. The emotional entanglement would be much harder to unravel. My next stop was the office of Patricia Green, the estate lawyer my grandfather had chosen to manage his trust. I'd spoken with her briefly on the phone before the confrontation at Xiao. Uncle James's office, but now I needed to understand the full scope of what Grandpa Thomas had put in place. Patricia's office was nothing like the wood-paneled, leather-chaired legal chambers I'd imagined. Instead, it was bright and modern, with simple furnishings and framed photographs of local landscapes adorning the walls. Patricia herself defied expectations. A woman in her early 60s with short silver hair, bright red glasses, and a no-nonsense demeanor that somehow managed to be warm at the same time. Emma, she greeted me, rising from behind her desk, to shake my hand firmly. It's good to meet you in person. Your grandfather spoke of you often. He did? I couldn't hide my surprise. Grandpa Thomas had always been kind to me, but we hadn't been especially close, at least not that I was aware of. Patricia gestured for me to sit as she returned to her own chair. Oh yes, he was quite observant, your grandfather. He noticed things about the family dynamics that concerned him deeply. She pulled a thick file from her drawer and laid it on the desk between us. That's why he set up this contingency trust, as a safety net for you. I still don't understand why he didn't tell me about it, I said. Patricia adjusted her glasses. Thomas hoped it would never be necessary. He tried speaking with your father about the favoritism, about the financial imbalances. But Robert was. She paused, searching for a diplomatic word. Resistant to change. Thomas decided that creating a backup plan was prudent, but he didn't want to drive a wedge between you and your parents. He hoped they would correct course naturally. She opened the file, revealing meticulously organized documents. When they didn't, and especially after he saw how they handled your inheritance from the primary estate, the contingency trust was designed to trigger automatically. As Patricia walked me through the details, I felt a surge of emotions. gratitude toward my grandfather for seeing what was happening and trying to protect me. Sadness that he'd recognized the dysfunction in our family so clearly. And a strange, belated sense of being truly seen by at least one family member. The trust was comprehensive. Beyond the Cedar Avenue family home and the Pine Lake cabin, it included controlling interest in Dad's automotive supply business, several investment accounts, and even some land upstate that I hadn't known about. My grandfather had essentially placed the bulk of his assets in a trust that would only activate if my parents continued their pattern of financial favoritism and exploitation. Your grandfather was very specific about the conditions, Patricia explained, pointing to a paragraph of legal text. He established a monitoring period after his death, during which my firm tracked how your parents handled the initial inheritance, whether they respected the intended equal division between you and your brother, and whether they continued to place financial burdens on you unfairly. And they failed all those tests, I said quietly. Patricia nodded, her expression grave. I'm afraid so. When they diverted your portion of the inheritance to Alex, that was strike one. When they mortgaged the family home to fund another of his ventures instead of transferring it to you as promised, that was strike two. And when we observed the pattern continuing with your own property on Maple Street, she spread her hands. The conditions were met. The contingency trust became active. I leafed through the documents, trying to absorb the magnitude of what my grandfather had done. This is overwhelming. It's a lot of responsibility, Patricia agreed. But Thomas was confident you could handle it. He said you were the only one in the family with a head for business. Just like me, he used to say. That made me smile despite myself. Grandpa had built his automotive supply business from nothing, working 7 days a week in the early years before expanding to 3 locations across the state. Dad had inherited the main branch, but had never shown the same drive or business acumen. Now I understood why Grandpa had seemed so disappointed in recent years when the company's performance had declined. So what happens now? I asked. Legally? Patricia leaned back in her chair. Legally, you now control these assets. You're the majority shareholder in the family business. You own the Cedar Avenue house and the cabin, though your parents have life tenancy in the main house as long as they don't attempt to take out additional loans against it. You have decision-making authority over the investment accounts. She tilted her head, studying me. The question is, what do you want to do with that control? It was a question I'd been asking myself since discovering the trust's existence. Did I want to assert full control immediately? Force my parents out of the family home? Take over the business completely? The power to do all these things was now legally mine, but wielding it felt complicated in ways I hadn't anticipated. I don't want to destroy my family, I said slowly. I just want things to be fair, balanced. I want them to see me, to respect my boundaries, to acknowledge what they've done. Patricia nodded approvingly. Thomas hoped you'd say something like that. He didn't create this trust for revenge, Emma. He created it as a reset button, a way to rebalance the family dynamics that had gone so far astray. Dad says the business is failing, I mentioned, remembering our coffee shop conversation. It is, Patricia confirmed grimly. Your father has been mismanaging it for years, taking out loans for expansion without the customer base to support it, using business funds for personal expenses, making poor inventory decisions. The pandemic hit them hard, and they never really recovered. She paused. The business could be saved with proper management, but it would take significant changes. And Alex's involvement? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Your brother has no official role in the company, but financial records show he's received consulting fees totaling over $200,000 in the past 3 years, despite having no business education or relevant experience. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing this new confirmation of the patterns I'd observed. So Dad's been using the business as another way to funnel money to Alex. Precisely, Patricia said, which is why the business is now circling the drain. Your grandfather built something sustainable, but your father has been treating it like a personal ATM. I spent the next 2 hours going through the documents line by line, asking questions, taking notes, and trying to formulate a plan. Chapter. The time we were finished, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across Patricia's office floor. You don't have to decide everything today, Patricia reassured me as we wrapped up. Take some time to think, process, decide what outcome you really want. The legal control isn't going anywhere. I gathered my copies of the documents and stood to leave. Thank you for explaining everything, and thank you for carrying out my grandfather's wishes so diligently. Patricia walked me to the door. Thomas cared deeply about you, Emma. He saw your worth even when your parents failed to. She hesitated, then added, he would be proud of how you're handling this, with dignity and thoughtfulness rather than reactive anger. As I drove home, my mind was racing with possibilities and responsibilities. I now had legal control over assets worth millions, yet I was still living in a one-bedroom apartment because my brother was occupying the only property I'd purchased for myself. The irony wasn't lost on me. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex just as the sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the modest 2-story buildings. As I stepped out of my car, I noticed a familiar figure sitting on the steps leading to my unit. Alex, hunched forward with his elbows on his knees, looking uncharacteristically subdued. My first instinct was to turn around and drive away. I wasn't ready for another confrontation, another round of accusations or manipulations, but something in his posture stopped me. A defeat I wasn't accustomed to seeing in my perpetually confident brother. Alex, I said as I approached, keeping my voice neutral. What are you doing here? He looked up, and I was startled by his appearance. His usually carefully styled hair was unwashed, his face stubbled, his eyes bloodshot. Hey, Em, he said, quietly. Can we talk, please? I hesitated, keys clutched in my hand. I'm not sure that's a good idea right now. Please, he repeated, an unfamiliar note of genuine pleading in his voice. Just hear me out, then if you want me to go, I will. Against my better judgment, I nodded toward my door. Fine, but I'm not changing my mind about anything. Inside my apartment, Alex stood awkwardly in the center of my small living room, taking in the modest furnishings, the secondhand couch, the IKEA coffee table. I realized with a start that he'd never visited me here, had never shown any interest in seeing where or how I lived. Do you want some water? I offered mechanically, falling back on hospitality as a buffer against the tension. Sure, thanks. He accepted the glass I handed him but didn't drink, just stared down at it as if it might contain answers. So, I prompted after the silence had stretched too long. You wanted to talk. Alex took a deep breath. I met with Dad's accountant today, and the bank. They showed me everything. He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. The business is worse than bankrupt, Emma. It's a house of cards that's already falling. Dad's been moving money around for years, taking out loans to pay other loans, using business credit for personal expenses, mostly mine. He swallowed hard. The bank is foreclosing on the second mortgage on the house, and the Maple Street property, your house, has a lien against it that Mom and Dad put there without telling either of us. This last revelation hit me like a physical blow. They put a lien on my house? How is that even possible? Because the deed is still in their names, Alex said miserably. They used it as collateral for a business loan last year. That's why they were so desperate to transfer it to me. The bank is coming after that property next. I sank down onto the couch, mind reeling. Just when I thought I'd uncovered the full extent of their financial manipulation, another layer revealed itself. Were you in on this plan? I asked, my voice harder than I intended. Alex shook his head vehemently. No. I swear, Emma. I knew they were helping me financially, but I didn't know where the money was coming from. Dad always made it sound like the business was doing great, that he had plenty to spare. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I didn't ask questions I should have asked. I didn't want to know. Willful ignorance, I said flatly. Yeah. He didn't try to deny it. It was easier to believe everything was fine, that I deserved the help, that someday one of my ideas would hit big and I'd pay everyone back. He laughed bitterly. 32 years old and I've never held a real job for more than 6 months. Never completed anything. Never stood on my own 2 feet. His self-awareness was so unexpected that I didn't know how to respond. This wasn't the Alex I knew. The charming, confident brother who always had an excuse, always landed on his feet, always found someone else to blame for his failures. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Alex set his untouched water glass on the coffee table. Because it's all coming apart, and for the first time in my life, I can't see a way to charm or talk my way out of it. Dad's business will be bankrupt within months. The house will be foreclosed on. Your house, the one I've been living in rent-free, is next on the chopping block. He met my eyes directly. And, according to Patricia Green, you're the only one who can stop it. So that was it. He'd spoken to my grandfather's lawyer and realized I now held all the cards. This wasn't about genuine remorse. It was about self-preservation. Let me guess, I said coldly. Dad sent you here to convince me to use Grandpa's trust to bail everyone out. Again. Alex flinched at my tone. No. Actually, he doesn't know. I'm here. He hesitated. Not in a good place right now. Mom's been crying nonstop. The house is a disaster. He looked down at his hands. I came because I need to say something I should have said years ago. I'm sorry, Emma. I stared at him, searching for the manipulation, the angle, the hidden agenda. But all I saw was exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine regret. I've been a parasite, he continued when I didn't respond. Living off you, off Mom and Dad, off anyone willing to fund my next great idea. I told myself I was an entrepreneur, that failure was just part of the journey, that I was taking necessary risks. But the truth is, I was just afraid. Afraid of real work, afraid of responsibility, afraid of being ordinary. I felt my defenses wavering slightly. This level of self-reflection was unprecedented from my brother. Alex? No, let me finish, he interrupted. You've been carrying this family for years while I took and took. You paid for a house I've been living in, covered bills I should have paid, watched Mom and Dad drain you dry to keep me afloat. And the worst part? I knew it was happening. I knew, and I let it continue because it was easier than changing. He looked around my small apartment again, seeing it with new eyes. You live like this while I'm in a 3-bedroom house that you paid for. How messed up is that? Pretty messed up, I agreed, not softening my tone. I don't expect you to. Forgive me, Alex said quietly. I wouldn't in your position. But I need you to know that I understand now what's been happening. And I know you're the only one who can fix the mess we're all in. There it was. The request I'd been expecting. My shoulders tensed. I'm not using Grandpa's trust to bail everyone out just so you can all go back to the same patterns. I know, he said, surprising me again. I'm not asking you to. Actually, I'm asking for something harder. He took a deep breath. I'm asking you to let me face the consequences of my actions, to let me hit rock bottom, to stop the enabling cycle once and for all. I blinked, confused. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying don't use the trust to save the house for Mom and Dad, or to keep me in the Maple Street property, or to rescue Dad's business. At least not until there are real enforceable changes. His voice grew stronger, more determined. I need to learn how to stand on my own. They need to learn they can't keep rescuing me at your expense. We all need to face reality. I studied my brother's face, hardly recognizing the maturity in his expression. What brought this on, Alex? Really? He sighed heavily. When Dad told me how bad things really were, I panicked. Called Patricia Green, thinking I could charm her into releasing funds from Grandpa's trust. Instead, she sat me down and showed me a video Grandpa made before he died. A message specifically for me. A video? This was news to me. Alex nodded. He knew me well, apparently. Knew I wouldn't believe it if someone just told me what he thought. So he recorded himself laying out exactly what he'd observed over the years. How Mom and Dad favored me. How they took from you to give to me. How I'd been enabled into permanent adolescence. His voice cracked slightly. He said he loved me too much to let it continue. That true love means wanting someone to become their best self, not keeping them dependent. That sounds like Grandpa, I said softly, remembering his practical wisdom, his no-nonsense approach to life. The kicker was at the end, Alex continued. He said, Alex, you have potential you've never tapped because you've never had to. I'm giving you the gift of necessity. He smiled sadly. Turns out necessity is a pretty harsh gift. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of my grandfather's foresight settling between us. He'd seen the dysfunction in our family with clear eyes, had tried to address it directly, and when that failed, had put in place a mechanism to force change, not out of malice, but out of love. So what happens now? I asked finally. Alex straightened his shoulders slightly. Now I move out of your house on Maple Street, which should be in your name, not Mom and Dad's. I find an apartment I can actually afford. I get a real job. Even if it's stocking shelves or delivering packages. I start repaying my debts, beginning with you. The determination in his voice was something I'd never heard before, not even when he was launching his latest guaranteed success business venture. This was different. This was grounded in reality rather than fantasy. And Mom and Dad? I pressed. They need to face consequences too, he said grimly. Dad needs to admit he's run the business into the ground and step aside. Maybe you can save it, maybe not, but he's proven he can't. They need to acknowledge what they've done to you, stop the manipulation, and rebuild from an honest place. He paused, though I'm not sure they're capable of that level of self-reflection. And if they're not? I asked, voicing the fear that had been lurking beneath the surface of all my decisions. If they can't change? If they keep seeing me as the villain for enforcing boundaries? Alex looked at me steadily. Then you need to be prepared to let them face the natural consequences of their actions. Even if that means losing the house, losing the business, losing their image of what this family is. And I need to be prepared to stand on my own without their safety net. It was such a startlingly mature perspective that for a moment I didn't know how to respond. This wasn't the entitled brother I'd known all my life. This was someone new, or perhaps someone who had been buried beneath layers of privilege and protection for so long that he'd never had the chance to emerge. Why should I believe this isn't just another manipulation? I asked, giving voice to my lingering doubt. Why should I trust that you've really changed overnight? Not overnight, Alex corrected me. The seeds were planted a while ago. I've had moments of clarity before, glimpses of how dysfunctional things were. I just always found it easier to slip back into old patterns. He leaned forward. I don't expect you to trust me right away, Emma. I haven't earned that. All I'm asking is for you to set boundaries and hold to them, for all our sakes. And what would those boundaries look like to you? I asked, curious to hear his perspective. No more financial support for me, from you or from Mom and Dad through you. I move out of your house immediately. I pay back what I owe you, even if it takes years. He counted off on his fingers. The Maple Street house gets transferred into your name as it always should have been. Mom and Dad acknowledge what they've done and commit to family therapy. Dad steps down from day-to-day management of the business. Each item he listed aligned with what I would have asked for myself, which either meant he truly understood the situation or was very good at telling me what I wanted to hear. With Alex, it had always been difficult to tell the difference. "I need time to think," I said finally. "This is a lot to process." Alex nodded and stood up. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll start packing my things at the house. Regardless, I should be out by the end of the week." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Emma, I am sorry. Not just because I got caught, but because I finally see what it's done to you. What we've all done to you." After he left, I sat motionless on my couch for a long time, trying to make sense of this new version of my brother. Was it genuine transformation or just a more sophisticated manipulation? Had hitting financial rock bottom actually shocked him into maturity, or was this just another performance designed to secure his comfort? I couldn't know for certain, not yet. But I did know that I now had the power to set boundaries and enforce them, regardless of whether anyone in my family had genuinely changed. The trust my grandfather had established gave me not just financial control, but leverage to demand the changes I'd needed for years. Tomorrow, I would start making decisions. I would call Patricia Green and begin the process of transferring the Maple Street house into my name. I would review the business finances with a professional consultant to determine if it could be saved. I would draft a clear, firm email to my parents outlining my conditions for assistance, including therapy, accountability, and new financial boundaries. Tonight, though, I allowed myself to feel the weight of it all. The betrayal, the responsibility, the faint glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, my family could rebuild from the ashes of the old patterns. Not immediately, not easily, but possibly. For the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of drowning. Morning light filtered through my apartment blinds as I reviewed the action plan I'd drafted the night before. The lined notepad in front of me contained a methodical breakdown of steps, each one representing another strand in the complex web of my family's financial entanglement that needed to be untangled. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully mine anymore. It was about reshaping the entire foundation of our family dynamic. My phone chimed with a text from Patricia Green confirming our 10 a.m. appointment at her office. Today would be the day I initiated real, tangible changes. I dressed with purpose: charcoal slacks, cream blouse, the tailored blazer I reserved for important client presentations. Looking professional helped me feel professional, and I needed every advantage I could muster. As I applied a light layer of makeup, I studied my reflection. The woman staring back at me looked determined, composed, even confident. But the slight shadows under her eyes betrayed the emotional toll of the past weeks. The drive to Patricia's office gave me time to rehearse what I wanted to say, how I wanted to proceed. Alex's unexpected visit yesterday had thrown me off balance. His apparent transformation from entitled mooch to self-aware adult seemed too sudden, too convenient. Yet there had been something in his eyes, a clarity I'd never seen before, that made me hesitant to dismiss it entirely. Could hitting rock bottom really have triggered such profound change? Or was this just another manipulation tactic, more sophisticated than before? Patricia greeted me with the same direct warmth as our previous meeting, ushering me into her office where a younger man in a crisp blue suit was already seated. "Emma, this is Mark Donovan, the financial consultant I mentioned. He's reviewed the business records and has some insights to share." Mark stood to shake my hand, his grip firm and professional. "Ms. Lawson, I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "Please, call me Emma," I replied, taking a seat opposite him. "And unfortunately, there don't seem to be any good circumstances when it comes to my family's finances lately." Patricia settled behind her desk, Mark has extensive experience with family businesses in crisis. I thought his perspective might be valuable as you decide how to proceed. Mark opened a leather portfolio containing numerous spreadsheets and charts. I've conducted a preliminary analysis of Lawson Automotive Supply's financial position, and I'm afraid the situation is even worse than you might realize. He turned the portfolio to face me. The company has been operating at a loss for over 4 years. Your father has been covering operational shortfalls with increasingly expensive loans, using both company and personal assets as collateral. I leaned forward to examine the numbers, including the Maple Street property. Yes, Mark confirmed. That appears to be one of the most recent collateral additions. There's also equipment financing that's underwater, inventory that isn't moving, and payroll tax issues that could potentially trigger IRS involvement. Can it be saved? I asked directly. Mark hesitated. Technically, yes. The business still has loyal customers, 3 functioning locations, and a recognized brand in the region. But it would require significant restructuring, capital infusion, and most importantly, he paused, looking uncomfortable. My father would need to step aside, I finished for him. Yes? Mark said, seeming relieved I'd said it first. Based on the pattern of decision-making evident in the financial records, your father's continued management would likely undermine any recovery efforts, Patricia interjected gently. Emma, before you make any decisions about the business, let's address the more immediate concern, the Maple Street property. I've prepared the paperwork to transfer the deed into your name as the rightful owner, but we need to address the lien issue first. How do we do that? I asked. 2 options, Patricia explained. We can pay off the business loan that the property is securing, which would remove the lien. Or we can negotiate with the bank to substitute other collateral from the trust assets. I considered this. What would happen to my parents' house on Cedar Avenue if we don't address these issues? Mark glanced at Patricia before answering. Based on the second mortgage that's already in default, foreclosure proceedings would likely begin within 60 days. Your parents would eventually be forced to leave unless the default is cured. The thought of my parents losing their home sent a complicated wave of emotions through me. Part of me felt they deserved consequences for their actions, but another part recoiled at the thought of them being homeless, especially at their age. Whatever they'd done, they were still my parents. What about the business employees? I asked, thinking of the people who depended on Lawson Automotive for their livelihoods. How many would be affected if the company fails? 27 full-time employees across the 3 locations, Mark replied, plus about a dozen part-time workers. Nearly 40 families would be impacted if I simply let the business collapse. People who had done nothing wrong except work for my father. That reality weighed heavily on my decision. Here's what I want to do, I said, coming to a decision. Use funds from the trust to clear the lien on the Maple Street property and transfer it into my name immediately. For the business, I want to implement a 90-day rescue plan with professional management brought in to stabilize operations. My father can remain involved, but will need to cede control to the management team. Patricia nodded approvingly. And the family home? I took a deep breath. Clear the default on the second mortgage, but with conditions. My parents will need to agree to financial counseling and family therapy. They'll need to acknowledge, in writing, the pattern of financial exploitation and commit to changing it. And most importantly, they'll need to recognize and respect my authority over these assets moving forward. Mark looked impressed. That's a balanced approach. Consequences without destruction. It's also contingent on Alex moving out of the Maple Street property immediately, as he promised to do, I added. I'll need that verified before any rescue funds are released. Patricia made notes as I outlined my decisions. And if they refuse these conditions, then I'll secure the Maple Street property for myself, but I won't intervene with the business failure or the foreclosure on their home, I said firmly. I'm willing to help, but not without guarantees that the old patterns will end. The why? Meeting continued for another hour as we detailed the specifics of each action item. By the time we finished, I had a clear roadmap forward. Patricia would handle the legal aspects, Mark would assemble the business rescue team, and I would need to have the difficult conversation with my parents to present the conditions of my assistance. One last thing, Patricia said as our meeting concluded. Your grandfather included this in the trust documents, with instructions that I give it to you once you took control of the assets. She handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandpa Thomas's distinctive handwriting. I accepted it with trembling fingers, suddenly overwhelmed by the connection to my grandfather. This man who had seen so clearly what was happening and had created a path for me to reclaim my agency. Thank you both, I said, tucking the letter into my bag to read in private. I'll let you know how the conversation with my parents goes. Driving away from Patricia's office, I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. Lighter because I finally had a plan. Heavier because the hardest part still lay ahead. I decided to go to the Cedar Avenue house immediately, without calling first. This conversation needed to happen in person, and giving my parents advance notice would only allow them time to coordinate their manipulation tactics. The family home looked smaller somehow as I pulled into the driveway, less imposing than it had seemed throughout my childhood. The lawn needed mowing. The flower beds my mother had once tended meticulously were overgrown, and the porch paint was peeling in, large flakes. Even the exterior reflected the deterioration happening within. I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering my courage. Finally, I took a deep breath, grabbed my folder of documents, and walked to the front door. I knocked firmly, feeling strangely like a visitor at what had once been my home. My mother answered, her expression shifting rapidly from confusion to alarm to a forced smile. "Emma!" she exclaimed with artificial brightness. "What a surprise! Come in, come in." The house smelled like it always had, a mixture of my mother's vanilla-scented candles and the faint mustiness of older homes. But something was different. Boxes were stacked in the entryway, some sealed with packing tape, others still open and half-filled. "What's going on?" I asked, gesturing to the boxes. My mother's smile faltered. "Oh, just doing some spring cleaning? Getting rid of things we don't need anymore." The lie was so transparent it almost made me laugh. They were preparing for the possibility of foreclosure, packing up what they could save. "Where's Dad?" I asked, following her into the living room, which was similarly strewn with partially packed boxes. "In his study. Robert," she called. "Emma's here." My father emerged looking haggard, his usually immaculate button-down shirt wrinkled and untucked. When he saw me, he straightened slightly, attempting to project the authority he'd always wielded in our family. "Emma," he said, his tone careful, "we didn't expect you." "Clearly," I replied, taking a seat on the couch without being invited. "We need to talk. All of us, together. About everything." My parents exchanged a glance loaded with unspoken communication before sitting across from me, my father in his usual armchair, my mother perched nervously on the edge of the love seat. "I've met with Grandpa's lawyer and a financial consultant," I began, getting straight to the point. "I understand the full situation now, with the business, with this house, with the Maple Street property, all of it." My father's jaw tightened. "That meddling old man had no right." "He had every right," I interrupted firmly. "He built that business. He accumulated those assets. And he saw exactly what was happening in this family, how you and Mom consistently prioritized Alex's wants over my needs, how you diverted funds meant for me to him, how you manipulated and exploited my financial success to cover for his failures." My mother's eyes filled with tears, her go-to response whenever confronted. "Emma, that's not fair. We love you both equally." "Stop," I said, my voice sharper than intended. I softened it slightly. "Please, just stop with that narrative. We both know it's not true. You may love us both, but you haven't treated us equally. Not even close. My father leaned forward, shifting tactics. Look, we've made some financial mistakes. I admit that. But everything we did was for this family. No, I cut in again. Everything you did was to maintain the family image you wanted to project. The successful son, even though he's never succeeded at anything. The parents who could afford to bail him out, even though you couldn't. The big house, the vacation cabin, the thriving business. All of it became more important than honesty, than fairness, than respecting my boundaries. My directness seemed to stun them momentarily into silence. I opened my folder and laid several documents on the coffee table between us. The business is failing. This house is heading toward foreclosure. The Maple Street property, my house, that you put in your names, has a lien against it because you used it as collateral without my knowledge. Alex has been receiving consulting fees from the business despite having no actual role there. These are facts, not accusations. My father's face had paled. How did you— It doesn't matter how I know, I said. What matters is what happens next. I outlined the plan I'd developed with Patricia and Mark, clearing the lien on the Maple Street property and transferring it to my name, bringing in professional management to rescue the business, and stopping the foreclosure on the family home. Then I detailed the conditions: financial counseling, family therapy, written acknowledgement of past exploitation, and recognition of my authority over the trust assets. This is blackmail, my father sputtered when I finished. No, Dad, I replied, calmly. This is boundary setting. This is me saying I'm willing to help, but not if it means enabling the same dysfunctional patterns to continue. I'm offering a lifeline, but you have to agree to change. My mother reached for my hand, her fingers cold against mine. Emma, please. We could lose everything. You've already lost me, I said quietly, the truth of it hitting me as the words left my mouth. Or at least, you've lost the version of me who would silently bankroll this family while being treated as an afterthought. That Emma is gone. So you'll punish us because we helped your brother? My father demanded, anger replacing his initial shock. Turn your back on your family over money? This isn't about money, I said, feeling a strange calm despite his rising anger. This is about respect, about honesty, about treating me like a valued member of this family rather than a convenient resource. If you can't see that, then maybe we don't have anything left to discuss. I stood, gathering my documents. I'm giving you 3 days to decide. If you agree to my conditions, sign these papers and we'll begin the process of stabilizing everything. If not, I'll secure what's legally mine, but I won't intervene to save the business or this house. My father stood as well, his face flushed. You'd really let the business fail? Let nearly 40 people lose their jobs? Let us lose our home? All to prove a point? I met his gaze steadily. I'm not the one who put those things at risk, Dad. You did that, over years of mismanagement and deception. I'm offering a way forward, but I won't be manipulated by guilt anymore. The choice is yours. As I turned to leave, my mother called after me, her voice breaking. What about Alex? Have you spoken to him? Yes, I replied. He's moving out. Of the Maple Street house by the end of the week. He seems to understand the gravity of the situation better than you do. I left them standing amid their half-packed belongings, my father's face a storm of anger and disbelief, my mother's crumpled in genuine distress. It wasn't the outcome I'd wanted, but it was the conversation we needed to have. Direct, honest, without the protective cushion of polite evasions we'd all hidden behind for so long. Back in my car, I sat for a moment, allowing the adrenaline of confrontation to subside. My hands were shaking slightly, but my mind was clear. I'd done what needed to be done. Now it was up to them to decide whether saving their material security was worth the psychological work of confronting their own behavior. As I started the engine, I remembered the letter from my grandfather that Patricia had given me. I reached into my bag and retrieved it, carefully breaking the seal and unfolding the single page inside. "Dear Emma," it began in my grandfather's distinctive slanted handwriting. "If you're reading this, then everything I feared about our family dynamics has come to pass, and you've had to take control of the trust assets. I'm sorry I won't be there to support you through this difficult time, but I want you to know that I've been watching for years, seeing how your generosity has been exploited, how your achievements have been diminished, how your boundaries have been ignored. I built this trust not just to protect the assets I worked a lifetime to accumulate, but to protect you, the only one in the family who truly understands the value of what's been built." Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. "You will face resistance. Your father will be angry. Your mother will cry, and your brother may lash out. Stand firm. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give those we love is allowing them to face the consequences of their actions. This isn't punishment. It's an opportunity for growth. For all of them." My grandfather's words seemed to reach across time, offering the validation I'd so desperately needed but never received from my parents. "I know you'll make wise decisions, Emma. You have the head for business that your father lacks and the heart for fairness that your brother needs to learn. Use both in equal measure. Remember, real family builds each other up, supports each other's growth, and respects each other's boundaries. Anything less isn't love. It's control wearing love's disguise." The letter concluded with a personal touch that made me smile through my tears. "P.S. The combination to my old safe in the garage at Cedar Avenue is 271432. There's something in there I've been saving for you alone." I folded the letter carefully and returned it to my bag. The mention of the safe intrigued me. I'd known about its existence but had never seen it opened. That would have to wait for another day, though. For now, I had more pressing matters to attend to. My next stop was the Maple Street house, my house, where Alex claimed to be packing his belongings. I needed to verify his commitment to moving out and reclaim the space that should have been mine all along. The Maple Street neighborhood was quiet as I pulled into the driveway. It was a modest area with well-maintained yards and a mix of young families and retirees. I'd chosen it carefully when purchasing the house, envisioning a life of quiet independence, perhaps eventually a family of my own. Instead, it had become yet another symbol of my family's dysfunction. To my surprise, a moving truck was already parked on the street in front of the house. As I approached the front door, I could hear movement inside, the scraping of furniture, the thud of boxes being stacked. I knocked briefly before using my key to enter. The living room was in organized chaos, with labeled boxes stacked near the entrance and spaces where furniture had clearly been removed. Alex emerged from the hallway carrying a box labeled kitchen, looking surprised but not displeased to see me. "Emma," he said, setting down the box. "I wasn't expecting you today." "Clearly you were expecting someone," I replied, gesturing to the moving activity. "You're really doing this?" He nodded, wiping perspiration from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Said I would, didn't I? Jim and Marcus are helping me move the big stuff to a storage unit until I figure out where I'm going long term." As if on cue, two men emerged from the back bedroom carrying a disassembled bed frame. Alex directed them to take it to the truck, before turning back to me. "I've packed everything that's mine," he said. "Anything that came with the house or that you bought is staying put." I made a list. He handed me a handwritten inventory of what he was taking and what he was leaving, meticulous in a way I'd never associated with my chronically disorganized brother. "I'm impressed," I admitted, scanning the list. "This is thorough. Turns out I can be responsible when I have to be," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "Who knew?" I walked through the house, noting the spaces Alex had already cleared and the areas yet to be packed. It was strange seeing the house in this transitional state. Not quite his anymore, but not yet fully mine either. "Have you talked to Mom and Dad today?" Alex asked, following me into the kitchen. "Just left them, actually," I replied, running my hand along the countertop I'd chosen years ago. Presented them with the rescue plan and conditions. "How'd that go?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "About as well as you'd expect. Dad's angry, Mom's distraught. Neither of them seems to understand that this isn't about punishing them. It's about changing a dysfunctional pattern." Alex leaned against the doorframe. "They've been living in their own reality for so long. I'm not sure they know how to see things any other way." He paused. "For what it's worth, I do. See it, I mean. How messed up it all was. How much they took from you. How much I took." I studied his face, still looking for signs of manipulation, but finding only what appeared to be genuine remorse. "What changed, Alex?" "Really? Because this level of self-awareness doesn't happen overnight." He considered the question seriously. "It wasn't overnight. There've been moments over the years when I'd catch a glimpse of the truth, like when you'd leave after a family dinner and Mom would immediately start talking about how lucky you were to have such a stable job, as if your success was just good fortune rather than hard work. Or when Dad would ask you for another loan that we all knew would never be repaid." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that reminded me suddenly of our father. I'd have these flashes of clarity, but then I'd push them away because facing the truth meant facing myself. The fact that I was 32 years old and had accomplished nothing on my own. It was easier to keep playing the role they'd assigned me, the creative one, the dreamer, the one who just needed a little more support until his big break came through. "And now," I prompted. "Now I can't unsee it," he said simply. Watching Dad go through the business finances with me, seeing the actual numbers in black and white, realizing that everything, the business, the house, my lifestyle, was built on financial quicksand. It was like waking up from a decades-long dream. He gestured around the house. "Living here rent-free while you struggled to afford your apartment. Taking consulting fees from the business for work I never did while actual employees worried about their jobs. It's all so clearly wrong now that I can't understand how I justified it for so long." His words resonated with my own experience, the slow awakening to patterns that, once seen, couldn't be unseen. The only difference was that I'd been on the giving end of the exploitation, while he'd been on the receiving end. "I hope you mean it, Alex," I said finally, "for your sake as much as mine." "I do," he replied, meeting my gaze directly, "and I know I need to prove it with actions, not just words. Which reminds me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded check. "It's not much, but it's a start. First payment toward what I owe you." I took the check, surprised to see it was for $2,500, a substantial amount given that Alex had never repaid me anything before. "Where did this come from?" I asked suspiciously. "Sold my car," he replied. "Got a cheaper used one instead. The difference is yours." The gesture, small as it was compared to the total he owed me, represented something significant, the first concrete action backing up his claimed transformation. "Thank you," I said, tucking the check into my pocket. "Not just for this, but for actually moving out as promised. For taking that first step." Alex nodded, a complexity of emotions crossing his face. "Do you think Mom and Dad will agree to your conditions?" I sighed, leaning against the kitchen counter. "I honestly don't know. Dad's pride may not let him accept my authority over assets he sees as rightfully his. And Mom, she's so invested in maintaining the family mythology that I'm not sure she can face the truth." "They might lose everything," Alex said quietly. "They might," I agreed. "But that's their choice now. I've offered a way forward. Whether they take it is up to them." The 3-day deadline I had given my parents loomed large as I pulled into the parking lot of Lawson Automotive Supply's main location. The red brick building with its faded signage had been a fixture in my childhood, a place where I'd done homework in my father's office after school, where I'd helped count inventory during summer breaks, where I'd learned the fundamentals of business that my father never seemed to fully grasp despite inheriting a successful operation. Now, as I stepped through the front entrance, it felt like entering a museum of missed opportunities. The front counter was empty, though I could hear voices in the back warehouse area. A bell above the door jingled as I entered, and moments later, Marge Donaldson appeared from the back office. She'd been the company's office manager for as long as I could remember, her no-nonsense efficiency often the only thing keeping daily operations running smoothly. "Emma!" she exclaimed, genuine warmth in her voice. "What a wonderful surprise! It's been too long." "Hi, Marge," I said, accepting her brief hug. "How are you?" "Oh, managing as always," she replied, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Your father mentioned you might be stopping by. He's in the warehouse with the delivery that just came in." I nodded, noting how she didn't ask why I was there, which meant my father had likely already shared at least some version of recent events with her. "Actually, I was hoping to look at some paperwork first. Is his office unlocked?" "Always is," Marge said, then hesitated. "Emma, things haven't been great here lately, just so you know." I appreciated her discretion. "I'm aware of the situation, Marge. That's partly why I'm here." She seemed relieved not to have to explain further. "His office is the same mess it's always been, but the filing cabinets are at least somewhat organized. Let me know if you need help finding anything." My father's office was indeed a chaotic reflection of his management style. Piles of invoices mixed with vendor catalogs, sticky notes plastered across computer monitors, half-empty coffee cups creating rings on important documents. I began systematically working through the most recent financial statements, comparing them with the audit reports Mark had provided. The reality was even bleaker than I'd realized. Payroll taxes hadn't just been delayed, they hadn't been paid at all for the last quarter. Vendor payments were months behind. The fleet of delivery vehicles was in desperate need of maintenance that had been repeatedly postponed. I was so absorbed in the paperwork that I didn't notice my father standing in the doorway until he cleared his throat. I looked up to find him watching me, his expression unreadable. "Making yourself at home?" he asked, his tone hovering between casual and confrontational. "Just doing my due diligence," I replied evenly, gesturing to the documents spread across his desk. "The situation is worse than I thought." He closed the office door behind him and took a seat in the visitor's chair across from the desk. His desk, though he made no move to reclaim it. "So you're really going through with this, taking over, playing the savior." "That's not how I see it," I said, setting down the invoice I'd been examining. "I'm trying to prevent 40 people from losing their jobs because of financial mismanagement, including you." "I built this business," he began. "No," I interrupted firmly. "Grandpa built this business. You inherited it when it was thriving and have been slowly running it into the ground ever since." His face flushed with anger. "That's not fair. We had the recession, then the pandemic, then supply chain issues. Every business in this industry faced those same challenges," I countered. "Yet somehow they managed without funneling company funds to family members, without defaulting on loans, without jeopardizing employees' livelihoods." We stared at each other across the desk, the roles strangely reversed, me in the position of authority, him on the defensive. It felt unnatural after a lifetime of deference. "Have you and Mom made a decision?" I asked, changing the subject. "The 3 days are almost up." He looked away, his jaw working. "Your mother wants to accept your terms. She's terrified of losing the house. And you?" He sighed heavily, suddenly looking older than his 62 years. I don't know that I can do it, Emma. Sign away control of the business my father built. Admit in writing that I've exploited you financially. It feels like surrendering my dignity. It's not about dignity, Dad, I said, softening my tone slightly. It's about acknowledging reality so we can move forward differently. And if I can't? Then I'll still secure what's legally mine, the Maple Street property, the controlling interest in this business. But I won't intervene to stop the foreclosure on the house or provide additional capital to save the business. He nodded slowly, absorbing this. And if I do agree, what happens to me, to this place? Professional management will come in to stabilize operations. You'll retain a position, advisory at first, with the possibility of more involvement later, if you demonstrate you can work within the new structure. The immediate focus will be on paying the back taxes, settling with creditors, and updating equipment and inventory. And the house? The default on the second mortgage will be cured, preventing foreclosure. But there will be strict conditions on any future financing to prevent the same situation from recurring. My father rubbed his face with both hands. You've really thought of everything. I had to, I replied simply. There's too much at stake to be impulsive or emotional about this. He stood abruptly and walked to the window overlooking the warehouse floor where employees were unloading a shipment. I always thought I was doing the right thing, you know. Supporting Alex when he struggled, trying to keep the family together, maintaining the lifestyle your mother had grown accustomed to. Even when it meant taking advantage of me? He winced visibly. I didn't see it that way. I saw us as a unit, family resources being allocated where they were most needed. Alex needed more help, so he got more. You were doing well on your own, so you got less. It seemed logical. It might have been logical if it had been discussed openly, if my consent had been sought, if there had been any recognition of what I was contributing, I said. But instead, it was taken for granted, hidden, manipulated. That's what made it exploitation rather than family support. He turned back to face me, his expression troubled. When did you become so assertive? You used to be more accommodating. I've always been assertive in my professional life, I pointed out. I just kept that side of myself separate from family interactions because it wasn't worth the conflict. But I can't compartmentalize anymore, not when the financial entanglement has become so extreme. A knock at the door interrupted our conversation. Marge poked her head in. Sorry to disturb you both, but there's someone here from the bank. Says it's urgent. My father's face paled. Tell them I'm in a meeting. I think you should see them, I said, gathering the documents I'd been reviewing. I'll give you some privacy. No, my father said unexpectedly. Stay. If you're taking over, you should be part of these discussions from the beginning. Surprised by this sudden shift, I nodded and remained seated as Marge showed in a serious-looking woman in a navy suit. She introduced herself as Vanessa Chen from First Regional Bank, the holder of several of the business loans. Mr. Lawson, she began without preamble, I'm here because your business account is severely overdrawn, and we have not received a response to our multiple notices regarding the defaulted equipment loan. My father looked momentarily lost, so I stepped in. Ms. Chen, I'm Emma Lawson. I've recently taken over financial oversight of the company as part of a family trust arrangement. We're aware of the issues and are implementing a comprehensive recovery plan, which includes addressing all outstanding loans. Vanessa shifted her attention to me, clearly reassessing the situation. I see. And what is the timeline for addressing the immediate deficiencies? Because I must inform you that the bank is prepared to initiate collection proceedings, including potentially seizing business assets as outlined in the loan agreement. We'll have a detailed repayment proposal to you within 48 hours, I said confidently, though internally I was scrambling to adjust my timeline. In the meantime, I'd like to provide a good faith payment toward the most pressing obligation. I took out my checkbook, not the business account, which was clearly empty, but my personal account. As I wrote a check for $5,000, I was acutely aware of the irony. Once again, I was using my own money to bail out the family business. The difference was that this time, it was a strategic choice made with full awareness, not a manipulated obligation. Vanessa accepted the check with professional neutrality. This will temporarily delay further action, but we will need to see the full proposal as discussed. After she left, my father collapsed back into his chair. I didn't realize they were already at the asset seizure stage, he admitted. I thought there was more time. There's never as much time as you think, I replied, tucking my checkbook away. Which is why you and Mom need to make a decision about my terms immediately, not in 3 days. Things are moving too quickly. He nodded, looking defeated. I'll talk to her tonight, but I think I already know what we have to do. He met my gaze directly. You've won, Emma. We'll sign your papers. This isn't about winning or losing. Dad, I said, gathering my things. It's about fixing what's broken, in the business and in our family. I'll have Patricia send over the documents this afternoon. Once they're signed, we can start implementing the recovery plan. As I walked through the warehouse toward the exit, I noticed the employees watching me curiously. They knew who I was, of course, the boss's daughter, but they'd rarely seen me take such an active role in the business. I wondered what my father had told them, what rumors were circulating about the company's future and their job security. On impulse, I stopped by Marge's desk on my way out. Could you arrange a staff meeting for tomorrow morning? I asked. I'd like to address everyone, directly about the changes coming. Marge looked relieved. Of course. 9 a.m. work for you? Perfect, I said. And Marge? Things are going to get better. I promise. Her smile was the first genuine one I'd seen all day. I believe you, Emma. Honestly, we've all been waiting for someone to step in before it was too late. That vote of confidence carried me as I left the building and headed to my next destination, the bank, to begin the process of clearing the lien on the Maple Street property. I just reached my car when my phone rang, an unknown local number. Emma Lawson, I answered, balancing my folder of documents as I fumbled with my car keys. Ms. Lawson, this is Officer Rivera with the Oakridge Police Department. My heart skipped a beat at the official tone. We're responding to a disturbance at 425 Maple Street. The individual involved mentioned you're the property owner. Are you available to come to the scene? Disturbance? What kind of disturbance? I asked, already sliding into my car. A domestic situation, the officer replied. Vaguely. It would be better to discuss in person. I'm on my way, I said, starting the engine. About 15 minutes. As I drove toward Maple Street, my mind raced with possibilities. Had Alex gotten into an altercation with the friends helping him move? Had my parents shown up to confront him? The officer's use of the term domestic situation suggested family involvement. I arrived to find 2 police cars parked in front of the house, lights flashing. A small group of neighbors had gathered at a respectful distance, watching the scene unfold. As I approached, I spotted Alex sitting on the front steps, head in his hands, while an officer stood nearby taking notes. There was no sign of my parents. I'm Emma Lawson, I announced to the closest officer, a young woman with a severe bun. I got a call about a disturbance at my property. Ms. Lawson, I'm Officer Rivera, she replied, extending her hand. Thank you for coming so quickly. What happened? I asked, glancing toward Alex, who hadn't yet noticed my arrival. According to your brother, she began, emphasizing the relationship in a way that made me think Alex had been explaining our complicated situation. He was in the process of moving out when his girlfriend arrived and became confrontational about items he was taking. The dispute escalated, and she began throwing items and damaging property. A neighbor called it in. His girlfriend? I repeated, confused. Alex hadn't mentioned being in a relationship recently. A Heather Daniels, Officer Rivera confirmed, checking her notes. She left the scene before we arrived, but we have her contact information. Mr. Lawson doesn't wish to press charges, but since there was property damage, we needed to contact the homeowner. What kind of damage? I asked, mentally calculating yet another expense I hadn't anticipated. Broken window in the back door, some damage to furniture, nothing structural, the officer replied. We've documented everything for insurance purposes. I thanked her and walked over to Alex, who finally looked up as I approached. His expression was a mixture of embarrassment and exhaustion. Emma, he said, standing quickly. I'm so sorry about this. I didn't expect… Girlfriend? I interrupted, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. He winced. Ex-girlfriend, technically. We broke up months ago, but she's been… persistent. When she found out I was moving, she showed up demanding. Some things she claimed were hers. And they weren't? Some were, some weren't, he admitted. I was trying to be fair, but she wanted everything. Furniture you paid for, electronics, even kitchen appliances that came with the house. When I refused, she started throwing things. I sighed, the adrenaline of the urgent police call giving way to weary irritation. Just another mess to clean up. I'll pay for the damages, Alex said quickly. I know this is the last thing you needed right now. I studied my brother, noting the genuine distress in his expression. A week ago, I wouldn't have believed his offer to take financial responsibility for anything. Now, after seeing his efforts to move out and make initial repayment, I found myself giving him the benefit of the doubt. Let's assess the damage first, I said, more gently than I'd intended. Then we'll figure it out. Inside, the house was indeed a disaster zone, though most of the chaos appeared to be from the interrupted moving process rather than Heather's. Rampage. The broken window in the back door would need immediate attention for security reasons, and a side table in the living room had been overturned, its glass top shattered. Various smaller items, picture frames, a vase, a desk lamp, lay broken among the scattered moving boxes. I'll call a glazier for the door right away, Alex said, pulling out his phone. And I'll clean up this mess. What was that all about, really? I asked as we began gathering the larger glass shards. This level of rage seems excessive for a dispute over possessions. Alex looked uncomfortable. It's complicated. Heather and I were together during one of my business ventures, the food truck idea. She invested some of her savings in it with the promise of being a full partner. Let me guess, I said dryly. The venture failed, her investment disappeared, and you broke up. Pretty much, he admitted. I should have repaid her when I got the consulting fees from Dad, but I didn't. She's been understandably bitter about it. So, this wasn't really about furniture at all, I observed. It was about money you owed her that she knows she'll never see. Alex nodded miserably. Just like everyone else I've disappointed. The difference is she's not family, so she doesn't feel obligated to forgive me or keep silent about it. His self-awareness was still jarring after years of excuses and deflection. We worked in silence for a few minutes, clearing debris and righting overturned furniture. Did you talk to Mom and Dad? Alex finally asked, carefully placing broken glass in a trash bag. Yes, I replied. I think they're going to accept my terms. Dad's pride is wounded, but the reality of the situation is sinking in. I had to write a personal check to the bank today to prevent them from seizing business assets immediately. Alex looked genuinely shocked. It's that bad? Dad never said… Of course he didn't, I interrupted. He's been hiding the truth from everyone, including himself, for years. Reality is finally catching up, and there's nowhere left to hide. As we finished cleaning the worst of the mess, My phone chimed with an email notification. It was from Patricia, confirming she'd sent the required documents to my parents and received a reply that they would review and sign them this evening. "They're going to sign," I told Alex, showing him the email. "It's actually happening." He nodded soberly. "What happens after? To all of us, I mean." It was a profound question that I'd been so busy with immediate crises to fully consider. What did the future look like for our fractured family once the financial issues were stabilized? "I don't know exactly," I admitted. "Professional management will take over the business operations. You'll continue your independence journey. Mom and Dad will keep the house, but with financial oversight. We'll all start therapy to address the underlying dynamics." "And you?" Alex asked. "What do you get out of all this besides a mountain of responsibility and a damaged house?" I looked around at the half-emptied home that should have been mine years ago. I get boundaries, self-respect, the knowledge that I'm no longer being exploited. I paused, considering. And maybe, eventually, a healthier relationship with all of you. "Do you think that's possible?" His tone was uncharacteristically vulnerable. "After everything?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "It depends on whether the changes we're seeing now, your sudden self-awareness, Dad's reluctant acceptance of reality, Mom's willingness to participate in therapy, are genuine and lasting, or just crisis reactions that will revert once the immediate pressure is off. And if they're not genuine, if we all slip back into old patterns, then at least I'll have protected myself legally this time," I said firmly. "I won't be pulled back into financial entanglement or emotional manipulation. That chapter is closed permanently." The glazier arrived to fix the door, and Alex insisted on handling the interaction and payment. I took the opportunity to walk through the rest of the house, mentally noting repairs needed and changes I wanted to make once it was truly mine again. It was strange to think of actually living here after years of displacement, like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been held hostage. By late afternoon, the immediate security concerns had been addressed, and Alex had made significant progress reorganizing his moving process despite the setback. I was preparing to leave when Patricia called. "Emma, I thought you should know immediately. Your parents have signed all the documents. The transfer of the Maple Street property can proceed, and we can implement the business rescue plan as discussed." A wave of relief washed over me. "Thank you, Patricia. That's unexpected. I thought they might wait until the last minute." "I think reality is setting in," she replied. "Your father mentioned the bank visit today. Nothing motivates action like imminent disaster." "What's the next step?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter, suddenly exhausted now that this hurdle had been cleared. "I'll file the property transfer documents first thing tomorrow. Mark is assembling the management team for the business and will schedule an initial assessment. And I've arranged for the first family therapy session this Saturday morning, as requested." I thanked her and ended the call, feeling oddly hollow despite getting exactly what I'd fought for. Alex appeared in the kitchen doorway, having evidently overheard my side of the conversation. "They signed?" he asked. I nodded. "Everything. It's official." "Congratulations," he offered uncertainly. "It doesn't feel like a victory," I admitted. "More like the beginning of a long, difficult journey." "At least we're all still talking," he pointed out. "That's something, right?" I nodded again, too drained for further conversation. As I gathered my things to leave, Alex stopped me at the door. "Emma? Thanks for not giving up on all of us completely. I know you could have just walked away." His sincerity caught me off guard. "I still might," I warned, "if things don't change." "Fair enough," he agreed. "But the fact that you're giving us this chance, it means something." I drove back to my apartment in thoughtful silence, the events of the day swirling in my mind. I'd secured my parents' agreement to my terms, confronted the dire reality of the business situation, dealt with an unexpected drama at the Maple Street house and taken the first concrete steps toward implementing the recovery plan. It was more progress than I'd expected to make so quickly, yet I felt strangely unsettled rather than triumphant. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I realized what was bothering me. Everything had been too easy. My father's capitulation. At the office, my parents' rapid signing of the documents, even Alex's continued show of responsibility. It all felt too sudden, too convenient. After years of manipulation and resistance, could they really change their perspectives so completely in just a few days? Or was this apparent cooperation merely a strategic retreat, a temporary concession while they regrouped and planned how to reassert control? I couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was still to come, that somewhere beneath the surface of their compliance, the old patterns were waiting for an opportunity to reemerge. The family therapy session on Saturday would be revealing. With a neutral professional present, would they acknowledge the exploitation and dysfunction openly? Or would they present a united front against me, portraying themselves as victims of my unreasonable demands? I unlocked my apartment door, stepping into the quiet space that had been my refuge during these tumultuous years. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine leaving it, moving back into the Maple Street house once Alex was fully out, reclaiming the life I'd planned before family obligation had derailed it. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. As I prepared a simple dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "We signed everything. Please call when you can." I stared at the message, sensing the emotional minefield it represented. Not tonight, I decided. I needed time to process everything that had happened, to prepare mentally for whatever came next. Tomorrow would be soon enough to navigate the complex emotions of a conversation with my mother. Setting my phone aside, I sat at my small dining table and ate in silence, mentally rehearsing what I would say at the staff meeting tomorrow morning. These were people whose livelihoods depended on the decisions I was making, whose families would be impacted by the success or failure of the recovery plan. The responsibility felt enormous, but also strangely fitting, as if I was stepping into a role I'd been unconsciously preparing for all my life. After dinner, I opened my laptop and began drafting a comprehensive email to Mark, outlining my observations from the business visit and the urgent issues that needed addressing first: the bank loans, the payroll taxes, the vendor relationships that needed repair. As I worked, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was rightfully mine or establishing boundaries with my family. It was about honoring my grandfather's legacy, about saving something worth saving, about proving to myself and everyone else that I was capable of more than they had ever given me credit for. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with financial challenges, emotional reckonings, and likely setbacks. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was walking a path of my own choosing, rather than one dictated by family expectation and manipulation. Whatever came next, whether genuine healing or continued struggle, I would face it on my terms, with clear boundaries and the legal protections I'd finally secured. I closed my laptop near midnight, exhausted but resolute. Tomorrow would bring the next phase of this journey, addressing the business employees, finalizing the property transfer, beginning the detailed work of financial recovery. But tonight, in the quiet of my apartment, I allowed myself a moment of acknowledgement. I had taken back control of my narrative, and regardless of how the family story ultimately unfolded, my own story would never again be written by someone else's hand. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine after days of overcast skies. I stood in front of my closet, deliberating over what to wear to our first family therapy session. It felt oddly like preparing for battle, though I reminded myself that the point was healing, not victory. I finally settled on a simple blue sweater and black pants, comfortable but put together, neither too formal nor too casual. Appearances shouldn't matter for something like this, But with my family, everything was a text to be read, interpreted, judged. The therapy office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, its interior transformed into a warm, neutral space, designed to facilitate difficult conversations. As I entered the waiting room, I was surprised to find I was the last to arrive. My parents sat stiffly on one sofa, both looking like they'd aged years in the past week. Alex occupied an armchair in the corner, scrolling through his phone with apparent nonchalance, though his bouncing knee betrayed his nervousness. "Emma," my mother said, standing to greet me with an awkward half-hug that I returned automatically. "You look nice." Before I could respond, a door opened, and a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes introduced herself as Dr. Marissa Levine. She led us into a comfortable room with chairs arranged in a circle, no desk or barriers between us. The deliberate setup left nowhere to hide. "I've spoken individually with each of you by phone," Dr. Levine began once we were seated, "so I have some background on the situation. Today is about establishing a foundation for our work together, understanding what each of you hopes to achieve from these sessions, and setting some ground rules for communication." She turned to me first. "Emma, since you initiated this therapy, as part of the family agreement, perhaps you could start by sharing what you hope will accomplish here." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of all 3 family members' eyes on me. "I want us to acknowledge the patterns that have damaged our relationships, the financial exploitation, the favoritism, the manipulation, and develop healthier ways of relating to each other. I want genuine change, not just compliance because of the legal agreements." Dr. Levine nodded. "And what would that genuine change look like to you?" "Respect for my boundaries, recognition of my contributions, equal treatment of both children." I hesitated, then added something I hadn't fully articulated even to myself until that moment. "And accountability, actual apologies for specific actions. Not just general regret that things got to this point." My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat as Dr. Levine turned to him. "Robert, what are your hopes for these sessions?" "Honestly," he said, his voice gruff, "I'm here because I had no choice. But since I'm here, I suppose I'd like to understand how we got to this point. How my daughter went from being part of the family to, this." He gestured vaguely between us. "This meaning?" Dr. Levine prompted. "Legal documents, conditions, professional management taking over my business," he replied, an edge creeping into his tone. "It feels like an overreaction." "An overreaction," I repeated, struggling to keep my voice level. "To years of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation?" Dr. Levine held up a hand. "Let's pause there. This illustrates exactly why we're here. 2 very different perceptions of the same situation. Robert, when Emma uses terms like exploitation and manipulation, how do you understand those?" My father looked genuinely confused. "That's what I don't get. We're family. We helped each other. Sometimes Emma gave more. Sometimes she received more. That's how families work." "When did I receive more?" I asked directly. "Give me one example." The room fell silent as my father struggled to respond. "Well, we co-signed your first mortgage," he finally offered, "which you then put in your names without telling me, and later used as collateral for a business loan." "Also without telling me," I countered. "How exactly did that benefit me?" Dr. Levine intervened again. "This is actually quite illuminating. Robert, you see your actions as normal family support. Emma experiences them as violations of trust. Diane," she turned to my mother, who had remained silent, "what's your perspective on this?" My mother twisted her wedding ring nervously. "I just want peace in the family again. I want us to stop fighting over money and property." "It's not about the money," I said, frustration building. "It's about the patterns, the favoritism, the way Alex's needs always came first, the way my success was taken for granted while his Minimal efforts were celebrated. "We love you both equally," my mother insisted, falling back on her standard refrain. "Love isn't just a feeling, Mom," I replied quietly. "It's expressed through actions, through how you treat people. And your actions have consistently shown that Alex matters more." "That's not fair," my father interjected. "Alex needed more support. You were always so independent, so capable." "So I was punished for my competence while he was rewarded for his dependence," I summarized. "Do you not see how dysfunctional that is?" Dr. Levine turned to Alex, who had been uncharacteristically quiet. "Alex, we haven't heard from you yet. What's your perspective on all this?" Alex looked up, his expression unusually serious. "Emma's right. I've been the favorite, the one whose failures were excused, whose needs were prioritized. I didn't see it for a long time because it benefited me, but now I do, and I can't unsee it." My parents looked at him with identical expressions of shock, as if his betrayal was more unexpected than my rebellion. "So now you're taking her side?" my father demanded. "It's not about sides," Alex replied. "It's about truth. You and Mom created a dynamic where I never had to grow up, never had to face consequences, while Emma carried all the responsibility. How is that fair?" For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that real change might be possible. If even Alex could see the dysfunction, perhaps my parents could eventually get there too. The remainder of the session involved Dr. Levine establishing communication guidelines for future meetings and having each of us identify one concrete behavior we would work on changing. My father reluctantly agreed to stop dismissing my perspective. My mother committed to recognizing when she was enabling unhealthy patterns. Alex promised to continue his journey toward financial independence, and I agreed to express my needs and boundaries directly rather than silently seething. As we left the session, my mother caught my arm gently. "Would you come over for dinner tomorrow? Just to talk, no agenda." I found Grandma's old recipe box in one of the moving boxes, and I thought maybe we could cook together, like we used to. The invitation caught me off guard. Cooking with my mother had been a rare point of connection in my childhood, one of the few activities where she seemed to see and appreciate me for myself. "I'll think about it," I said honestly. "It depends on how the business transition goes tomorrow." She nodded, accepting my boundary without the guilt trip I'd have expected a week ago. "Just let me know. The invitation stands." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The professional management team took over day-to-day operations at Lawson Automotive, implementing immediate changes to stabilize the business. My father struggled with his reduced role, but grudgingly acknowledged the necessity as vendors were paid, tax issues addressed, and employee morale began to improve. Alex followed through on his promise, moving completely out of the Maple Street house and finding both an affordable apartment and a job at a local hardware store. Entry-level work that would have been beneath him before, but which he now approached with unexpected humility. My mother and I began the slow process of rebuilding our relationship, cooking together occasionally and having cautious conversations that carefully avoided the manipulative patterns of the past. The therapy sessions continued weekly, sometimes productive, sometimes tense, but always honest in a way our family interactions had never been before. As for me, I finally moved back into the Maple Street house, repainting and refurnishing to make it truly mine. The property transfer was complete, the lien removed, the legal protections firmly in place. I maintained my boundaries and enforced the conditions of the family agreement, even when doing so was uncomfortable or met with resistance. There were setbacks, of course. My father occasionally slipped into old patterns of dismissal and control. My mother sometimes tried to smooth over difficult truths rather than face them. And Alex had moments of entitlement that echoed his former self. But the difference now was that these behaviors were recognized, named, and addressed rather than enabled and ignored. 6 months after that fateful day at Uncle James's office, I hosted a small dinner at my home, with my family as guests. As we sat around my dining table, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years, I realized that while our family would never be perfect, it had the potential to be something it had never been before: honest. The house I had paid for twice was finally mine. The business my grandfather had built was on the road to recovery. The family dynamics that had caused so much pain were slowly healing. And I had discovered something essential in the process. Sometimes you have to risk losing everything, even family, to reclaim yourself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.